2000. Ooh, I'm representing Eyeseeme. Let's do it. Aha. I see me. 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 Hope bunch of them see this.
Yes.
You guys hear me okay? Okay, great. Hello, everybody. Hello, everybody. This is Jeffrey Blair, co-owner of the Eyeseeme African American Children's Bookstore in University City, Missouri. Welcome to Eyeseeme Spotlight, where we feature the best and brightest authors out in the market today. And today we have a really, really good program, really special guest here. But before, I just want to really welcome, we have something different today. I have a co-host. Today. This is such a big event. I want to make sure I have some help with it. So I have a co-host. His name is actually Anthony Ross. He is the director of the Remember the 400 Foundation, which is a youth group that focuses on advocating for African American history. And so, hey, Anthony, can you hear me?
Yes. Hey, how you doing?
All right. Say hello to everybody. So he's going to be joining us and help us as we interview our special guest today. But first, some housekeeping. Again, for those of you that are here, please go into the chat. Let us know that you're here. Say hello. Tell us where you're from. If you're here representing a school or organization, let us know that as well. You're welcome here. Also, we're streaming on the webinar through Zoom, but also through Facebook. So you can share. Tell your friends and family to come on. We have something for everyone. This book is geared towards middle school, high school, adults, parents, teachers. It's must have reading for you. So please share the word, have them come on to the Eyeseeme Spotlight as we're going to talk about some very important topics here, okay? All right, so along the way, as you say hello in the chat, also in the question section, please throw in your questions for our guest. As we go through our presentation, our discussion, put them in there, and then towards the end of it, we'll definitely make sure that the author will answer your questions, okay? All right, so our special guest today is the author of The Last Children of Mill Creek, and our special guest is Vivian Gibson. Vivian Gibson, yes, thank you so much for joining us, Ms. Gibson. Thank you so much. The Last Children of Mill Creek. So this book has won a lot of awards. There's a lot of buzz out there about this. It's in the schools. It's something. It's about a hidden history here in St. Louis, and I want to make sure that you guys stay tuned and be able to really find out really what this book is about and why it's so special. But first, let me give you just a little glimpse, a little bio that I have here for Ms. Gibson. If I can find my window. So many windows. Need a bigger screen. All right, and then I will pull it up. Okay, I'm gonna read a little bit about that, and then I'm gonna hand it over to Miss Gibson. So, Miss Vivian Gibson was raised on Bernard Street in Mill Creek Valley, which is 454 acres in downtown St. Louis, which comprised of the nation's largest urban renewal project beginning in 1959. Just keep that in mind, the largest urban renewal project beginning in 1959. She started writing short stories about her childhood memoirs of the dying community after retiring at age 66. Her memoir, The Last Children of Mill Creek, which is published by Belt Publishing, was published in April 2020 when the author was 70 years old. Gibson was a contributing playwright for 50 and 50. She performed at the Billie Holiday Theater in Brooklyn, New York, the author of short stories, Sun Up to Sundown, published in St. Louis Anthology. Essays excerpted from her memoir titled My Father's Accident appeared in the Plo, I think, quarterly magazine. Just so many accolades to really say about her and the things that she's accomplished. And one of the latest is that The Last Children of Mill Creek won the Missouri Humanities Council Award 2020 for Literary Achievement. Literary Achievement Award, what this book has garnered. Gibson received an AFA degree in apparel design from the Fashion Institute of Technology in New York City, my hometown, and earned a bachelor's degree in business administration from Fontbonne University, right down the street. Washington University, St. Louis, and honored her as one of its most outstanding students in 2012, when she received her master's in nonprofit management at age 63. She just doesn't stop. She keeps going.
Congratulations.
Keeps going. She currently lives less than a mile from the historic Mill Creek Valley community in downtown St. Louis that she writes about in her memoir. And Vivian has 2 adult children. So this is an important topic. And whether you're from St. Louis or not from St. Louis, the dynamics that we're going to speak about, I've lived a few places in the country. I've seen everywhere. I've seen this in Newark, New Jersey. I've seen this in DC. I've seen this in Florida. No matter anywhere that we've lived, I've heard these stories over and over again. So it's a story about St. Louis, but it's not unique to St. Louis. And I think Ms. Gibson did a fabulous job of really bringing that story to life. So without further ado, I will hand it over to our guest, the special guest this evening, Miss Vivian Gibson. Welcome.
Jeffrey, thank you so much. And Anthony, it's very nice to meet you. I look forward to us chatting later on in this presentation. Jeffrey, you took a little bit of my presentation when you talked about the fact that this is not a story that's unique to St. Louis. You're absolutely right. It happened in virtually every urban center throughout this country. And it just so happened that Black people lived in those urban centers, and highways went through every downtown and dispersed just about every community that you can even imagine. I'd like to start with the fact that I came to writing very late in life. I waited until I retired, and frankly, I never considered myself a writer. I mean, I have a college degree, and I've written papers and dissertations and business reports in my jobs, but I never ever thought of myself as a creative writer. But after retiring, I was just going through some file cabinets and just kind of cleaning out my second bedroom / office and of all the paper that I had accumulated over years and years and years. And eventually I would see something that I'd written years before. And that went on for a couple of weeks. And by the end of that period, I had a stack of yellow pads and spiral notebooks and backs of envelopes and napkins and torn pieces of paper where I'd written things for years. And I decided to try to compile them all. So I joined a creative writers workshop that was offered for seniors. And in the description, it said, no writing experience necessary. I went, perfect, that's me. So me of little faith joined this group and was surprised at how well received my writings were. First of all, a writing workshop, for those of you who may not be familiar, is a group of 10 or 12 people who write and share their writing with each other and critique it for the purpose of to improve the writing. So you can imagine that it's a frightening experience to just put yourself out there, read something that you've written and nobody else has ever seen. And that's one of the things, all these pieces that I found, I've never shown them to anyone, ever. And some of them were as old as 40 years. And so to put myself out there to read and then be critiqued, and one of the rules of this workshop was you cannot speak, you cannot defend what you write. So you write, you read it, the other participants have it in writing so they can scribble on it, and while you're reading yours, they're writing things down and you're going, what are they writing? But you can't speak. And the idea is if you have to explain it or defend it, you didn't do a good job of writing.
Yeah.
So after being terrified for probably the first 6 months, I eventually loved the whole workshop experience. And I was persuaded that my writing was interesting, the topic was interesting, and that my writing was good. I was probably the last one to believe that. But I was convinced to submit some of my writing to writing groups, to literary groups. The very first thing you mentioned in my bio, I submitted to a group, a theater group in Brooklyn, the Billie Holiday Theater in Brooklyn. And they were requesting Black women to submit stories about being a Black woman. So I submitted a story and they accepted it, and it was part of a theater production. And that was encouraging. So I was brave enough to submit something else that was a anthology for St. Louis. And that was simply for people to submit stories about St. Louis. It could be old stories, it could be current stories. So I did that and it was accepted. And I was so nervous about it that it was something that I had workshopped earlier that day. And I think the deadline was midnight. And I think at 11:45, I finally sent it. And the very next morning, the editor emailed me and said, I just read your piece. It's beautiful. I love it. Do you have more? And one thing led to another. He shared it with his publisher, and they requested that I discuss making this memoir, writing this memoir. And 2 years later, I had a book.
Wow.
Nice.
Wow.
I left out all the part about the editing and the negotiating the contract and that part, but you know how that is. So what I'd like to do for you today is, first of all, the book doesn't have any pictures. It only has one, and that was part of my inexperience in negotiating my contract. I assumed I was going to have pictures, and when all the editing was done, I said, okay, let's talk about the pictures. And they said, oh, there's no budget for pictures. So I had tried to get one picture in. So the next book, I'll know to negotiate that sooner. So what I've done is put together, and I'm going to go in and try to share this screen now.
Sure.
I'm going to show you a few pictures. There we go. That should have been in the book, okay? So this book is written from the perspective of a young girl, me. I guess that I was probably between the ages of 4 and 10. I was 10 years old when Mill Creek was destroyed. I arrived at the age 4 because I remember my older siblings leaving for school and all the hubbub that happens getting ready for school and all the scurrying around. Once they closed the door, I remember the quiet, the way the house, the whole atmosphere changed when it was just my mother, my brother, and myself. And so that's how I know that I have memories back as far as probably 4 years old, before I even started school. So this is a sketch of our family house. I was putting together a similar presentation, and I said to my brother, I said, I don't have one picture of our house. I told him that one evening. The next morning, he sent me this sketch. So now I have a sketch of our house. It looks a lot grander than it was. It was a 3-room house on the lower floor where 11 of us lived in these 3 rooms. My grandmother owned the house. It was 2649 Bernard Street between Jefferson and Leffingwell. My grandmother lived upstairs in 3.5 rooms, and one of those rooms she rented out to a boarder. Those days we called them roomers. If you look at the census report for the 20s, 30s, and 40s of people living in Mill Creek, many of them have roomers. And those were usually people who came up from the South, other relatives or friends, and they rented out rooms in their homes for people to live until they could find their own place. This is a picture of a street called Lawton, Lawton. It's right off of Jefferson. And I put this picture here because I write a lot about how poor we were and how kind of shabby our house was. There were very poor people, but there were also people who were professionals. We have doctors and lawyers and teachers and all kinds of educators and professional people who lived in very nice homes. These are the same homes that you would see on Lafayette Square, in Soulard.
Yeah.
These houses, this set of houses on Lawton would be right in the middle of what is now Wells Fargo, right off,
Wow.
between Pine Street and Market Street. And the sad thing about how, in addition to how beautiful these houses are, not only do they not exist anymore, there is not even a Lawton Street anymore. They just wiped out even the name of the street.
Wow.
Of one of the nicest sections of Mill Creek. This is a picture of my older siblings. When you read the book, you'll get to know them all very, very well. This is Tootie. Honey, this is Honey over here. This is Randall, he's like the bad boy. My oldest sister, Laverne, my sister Beverly, and my sister Jean. I'm not even born yet. Me and my younger brother have not even been born yet. And I was hard pressed to even find one picture of all of us in the same picture. So you'll see us in various groups. These are my parents. This is my beautiful mother. And I think this is probably what she looked like around the time she came to St. Louis. When she met my father. This is my mother and father with my two oldest siblings. And I like to say that this is my mother before 8 children, and this is my mother with little fat cheeks after 8 children. Glad she doesn't hear me say that.
Yeah, right.
This is my father. Again, around the time probably that he met my mother. He sang in a quartet. And on the weekends, he was a truck driver and a janitor during the week and a quartet singer on the weekends. This is an interesting picture here. It is the last picture that my father, his mother, and her third husband, Mr. Hodges, before they left Arkansas. They left Arkansas so that my father at age 14 could go to high school. He was the first person in his immediate family to even go to high school.
Wow.
And so they packed up their things. They had heard about Vashon High School that had been built in 1927, and this is about 1929 here. Set off for him to go to high school, and that's how they got to St. Louis. Can you imagine moving from your state just to go to high school? That's how important it was.
Yeah.
And I should say that Vashon was the second high school in St. Louis for African-American Black children. Sumner, of course, was the first. And Vashon was built because of so many Blacks coming up through the Great Migration from the South and moving into Mill Creek. They needed a school for them.
Wow. So I knew the significance of Sumner and Vashon to St. Louis, but I didn't know for like states away, people would come just to go to that. I didn't know that.
Oh,
fascinating.
Yes, absolutely. From Kansas, from rural Missouri, certainly from Arkansas, neighboring states, maybe Mississippi, I'm not sure, but definitely Arkansas. And it's interesting, my first husband, even in the 1950s, came from Arkansas. His mother had come from Arkansas to go to Sumner, and he did the same thing in the late 50s. So they were still coming. Yes, came from other states. So this is probably, I think this is the one picture that is in the book that I fought for at the end. This is an interesting story. My mother was a volunteer at the NAACP. She volunteered at the office that was in the People's Finance Building. which was at the intersection of Jefferson and Market. It was a very popular business building that was built by Black people with Black funds, one of the few built in the country. So Mill Creek was very proud of that building. I think I have a picture of it later. But she volunteered there, and they had a campaign for families to join the NAACP. And we joined as an entire family, and they put our picture in the St. Louis Argus newspaper.
Ah,
Nice.
nice. Nice.
So this is an interesting picture that kind of depicts houses that were similar to ours. This is the back of these houses. Here on the side would be alleys. Most of the houses were two and 3 story houses, and they had these long wooden stairs going up the side. They had very narrow and long backyards, and most of them had outhouses and coal sheds in the backyard. Some people had indoor plumbing, but some people did not. There were still, in 1959 in downtown St. Louis, people using outhouses. So you can see how densely populated this is. In the background is the Continental building that's on Olive, just west of Grand. So that's the Continental building. This used to be a hotel. Now it's a dormitory for St. Louis University. This is the college church. So you can see how close Mill Creek is to St. Louis University. It was right across the street. St. Louis University's neighbors were directly across the street in Mill Creek.
Wow.
Can you explain what is a coal shed?
Coal shed is simply a shed. People had wood burning and coal burning stoves, cast iron stoves in the middle of the floor in their rooms. And so men selling wood and coal drove down the alleys, and there was a chute on the alley side that they could open and shovel the coal into it, so you could come out of your house from your side and pull out the coal to take into the house. You brought out these little buckets, and you put the coal in, and the buckets had a kind of a spout almost like, and so you could just kind of throw it into the stove. So that's what a coal shed is. And then that's the back side of it, and maybe the front side of it was just storage, or maybe you could put wood in it or that sort of thing. Yeah, so you haven't heard of a coal shed, huh?
No.
That's interesting. There's so many things that people take for granted that everybody did it. New York was a totally different place, I guess.
Yeah.
So, did you grow up in Harlem?
No, I was born in Brooklyn and grew up in New Jersey.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, so a suburb.
Ah, so this is an interesting picture of Market Street. This is a parade on Market Street. This tower here is Union Station.
Ah.
So you now get a sense of where it is. You're on Market Street between Grand, which is St. Louis University, and Union Station, which is 20th Street. So that's basically the east and west borders of Mill Creek.
Wow.
So you'll recognize this building in the back here. This is the City Courts building, the Egyptian architecture there. This is what is now the AT&T building, but it was Southwestern Bell Telephone in those days. I can't figure out what's over here. It's pretty tall. So another kind of fact that's pertinent to today is that right about here is where the new soccer stadium is going. So the new MLS soccer stadium is in Mill Creek. So if you, I think they should call it Mill Creek Soccer Stadium, don't you?
I think so too.
Yes,
I think so.
yes.
I think we should start something there.
Start a
So this is-
petition.
That's right. That's right. So it's right on the eastern edge of Mill Creek. So here is a map. This is the map that should have been in the book. I tried. I really did try. And when we do the next printing, I'm going to make sure this map is in the book. So this is Grand Avenue. So you can see all these houses here. This is Mill Creek. And this map, incidentally, was made for the renewal project. So this was to show exactly the boundaries of what was going to be torn down. Look at how densely populated it is. There are no vacant lots. There are no parks either, but there are no vacant lots. So Grand Avenue, so everything on the west side of Grand is St. Louis University, and everything on the east is Mill Creek. So now if you look at St. Louis University, it comes all the way down here. So they got this whole big section of Mill Creek. They benefited probably better than anybody. As a matter of fact, there were a few lawsuits because St. Louis University got so much, and they were a religious institution, and there was some discussion about church and state and how they benefited from this land grab first, basically. So here is Market Street. It's kind of diagonal down the middle of Mill Creek. So you can see that this was very, and what you can't see at the end of this map is where the picture I just showed you, where Union Station is. So right at the end of that is Union Station. So part of the problem was this was a pretty rundown part of the city because it was the oldest part of the city. So everybody, you know that Market Street ends right at the arch. The arch is where the city, that bend in the river is where the city began. It was a fur trading post. All the immigrants, all the Irish and Italians and Eastern European Jews, they all came in and lived in these houses in Mill Creek. So by the time Blacks started around the turn of the century, 1900, 1920, and started coming, these houses were already 100 years old. And so as white people started moving west and north and south, these houses were pretty much relegated to poor Blacks coming up from the south. There were some freed Blacks and former slaves in St. Louis, but the slave population in Missouri was small compared to the South. And many of those became the Black people who lived in the Ville, who went to Sumner High School. Out of slavery, of course, they had skills. They were barbers and plumbers, everything. They did all the work, so they had skills. So many of them were able to move to a higher income level than some of the people coming in from the South. Our house is about right here. This is Jefferson. This is a Jefferson. It goes over the bridge. This white space here is where the railroad tracks are currently. And along this edge is where they built Highway 6440, which was their reason for tearing all of this down. So you have a highway that's going to go along this edge, maybe a couple of blocks. So why not get rid of everybody? So 20,000 people were displaced. This was a tight-knit community. People supported each other. Granted, we were segregated. We didn't have much choice about being tight-knit and supporting each other because there were sunshine laws that said that Black people had to be west of Skinker and Kings Highway and even Grand by sunset. But it was a very, very supportive community. This area here is Vashon High School. So this is Vashon High School, which is now on the campus of Harris Stowe State University. Vashon is one of only 4 buildings that remained after they tore down all of these buildings. One of the other buildings, I think, is this building here, which is a church. And I think I'll show you the picture of that later. I hope so. I have so many of these slides that I mix up. But there were only 4 buildings that remained, and this church was, first of all, there were 40 churches. And I've told you that this was the oldest part of the city. So all the white churches, the beautiful white churches and synagogues that were part of the white community became Black churches. So there were beautiful churches along Washington Avenue, along Pine Street and Lawton, beautiful and Olive churches that were all torn down. So there was a committee of architects at Washington University that came together and said, we'll choose one church to remain. And that church is here. It now belongs to St. Louis University. It is, I like to give you a landmark. So if you know where Pappy's Barbecue is on Olive, this church, Pappy's would be right here. The church is right across the street. And you may not notice it because there's a big parking lot and it sets back pretty far. And you see the back of the church. The beautiful front of the church has been cemented over, and there are dumpsters in front of it. You see the back of the church. So the next time you go down Olive or go to Pappy's, look and see this beautiful church. It's now a conference center for St. Louis University. The Black congregation stayed there. And incidentally, it was a very famous church. Famous writers and orators came there for the community. But when everybody else left, they had nobody was going to come drive. First of all, most people didn't even have cars. They weren't going to take the streetcar back, and a lot of the other churches had relocated west and north. Let's see. Here are some of the churches. You see this beautiful stone church. This was the only Catholic church there. They had white nuns and a white priest, but they had a school for Black children and a gymnasium where boys did summer camp and basketball camp and that sort of thing. St. Malachi Catholic Church. This is St. Malachi after the wrecking ball hit it.
How many churches were in Mill Creek?
40 churches.
Oh, wow.
Some of them were just absolutely gorgeous cathedrals almost. They were beautiful. It's very, very sad. Let's see. Now, this is our church. This was on Ewing, right between the railroad tracks and probably Scott Street or Randolph or something like that. This is an interesting story. My brother's an artist, and in his retirement, he restores picture frames. So he goes in and out of secondhand shops and resale shops, just looking quickly through the bins of picture frames to see if there's something that he wants to use. And one day he noticed this picture, and he first thought he was looking at it because there were Black people in it, and he didn't see a lot of picture frames with Black people in them. So he's looking at it, and it just looks so familiar. And it turns out that it is our church, our congregation around 1940. This is the pastor of the church. His name was Felix Shepherd, and guess what my brother's name is? Shepherd. He's named after this man that he just happened to find this picture of.
Oh, wow.
This is my grandmother right next to him.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
And right up in this corner, you can barely see it, but this man has on a soldier's uniform and a soldier's hat. It's my father. And that's how we were able to kind of date the picture, because my father was only in the Army for 6 months. He had too many children, so the Army sent him back home. So we know. And so a lot of people that I write about, I write a lot about the church and the people in the church. Many of them are in this picture. So this is fascinating. This picture happens to be in the History Museum in an exhibit. Now we donated it. So here's that church that I was telling you about. You can see that, oh, here, let me show you the front of the church first. So you can't see it, but the date on this picture is 1956, which was 2 years before the Mill Creek was torn down. So you look how beautiful the front of this church is, and there's a beautiful house next door to it. This is right in the middle of Mill Creek. Now they've cemented all of this over, all these windows and this archway, and the front of the church now backs up to a dormitory on the Harris Stowe campus. So there are dumpsters in front of it, and there's a big fence around it. And so now the front of the church is the back of the church. So if you're driving down Olive, this is what you'll see. And you should go in, there's a plaque inside that I think this is about the size, what the plaque says. That's all. That's the only way you know that it was part of Mill Creek. It's the only plaque in all of that 452 acres that even says that Mill Creek used to be there. So my mother was an artist and a crafts person. She crocheted and made hats and made all kinds of artwork. And this is a few of the things we have left that she did. We didn't know that we should have kept some of those things. We didn't. As a matter of fact, we didn't keep them because she sold them. It was her business. So these are two of my brothers. Again, when you read the book, you'll know Honey and Randall very well. I didn't realize until after the book was finished how much I wrote about them. So they were very special to me. This is me just about the time we moved, or right after we moved, and I learned to comb my own hair. So I'm very proud of this hairdo. This is my brother, Shepherd. Honey, later on, he's called Shepherd. He was Honey all of his life. He went to high school. He went to Soldan High School his freshman year. And you know how football players go to that early practice in late August? So he went to this practice, and the coach called him Shep because his name is Shepherd. And he came home and announced that he was no longer to be called Honey. He wanted to be called Shep. And so now he's called Shep. And this is an early picture of me. Let's see. So this is one of the few pictures of all of us that I could find. This was probably around 1961. We had moved from Mill Creek into our new house. My brother Randall had gone off to the Marines, and this is our family picture, one of probably the last picture we took as a group. And this is my father who came to New York to my wedding. And look how I'm looking at my new husband. I am so happy. These are my brothers and my dad and my sister Jean. And this is the last picture I have of my father. He died 6 months later. So I was really glad he got to come to see me and how I lived in New York. So that's it. Let me get out of the share, and hopefully we can have a discussion now. Anthony? Let's see. That's a few. Anthony, I can't hear you. Are you muted? Yeah. Anthony, I can't hear you. You're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Now I can hear you. There you
All
are.
right, all right.
Talking for 2 minutes to you. not really.
No, I was enjoying the presentation. Oh my gosh, that was very, very fascinating.
Oh, good. I'm glad.
Especially for me in my youth. I grew up off of Spring and Lafayette.
Mhm.
Lafayette being off Grand. So traveling down there, I actually used to go to the doctor's office right there at
Where Grandview Plaza is?
Well, Angeline, I hate to interrupt you, but I think this is important. There actually was a creek, a mill creek, and the source of the creek was at Spring between Grand and Vanderbilt. So you lived at the mouth of the Mill Creek. It flowed down kind of parallel to Shoto to the Mississippi River. So you have a connection to Mill Creek. You went out again. There you go.
This is so fascinating because childhood, you just travel the streets, right? You just walk around, you don't know what part of the history. And it's just, oh my gosh, this is looking at the pictures and living here. I'm sorry, can you hear me?
You keep muting yourself.
Okay, is that better?
No,
But can you hear me?
I can hear you, but he can't hear me.
Yeah, I can hear you.
No, we can hear you.
Oh, okay. The sign says you're muted. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
That's fine.
I think that the engineer's doing some things in the back. So,
Oh, okay. All right.
All right.
I'm
Okay,
sorry.
Sorry about that.
I won't interrupt anymore.
No, that's why this is so fascinating. Like we were saying, right? You grew up on these streets and you walk these streets and you don't know the history that's there.
Mhm.
Right.
And seeing the presentations, just like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Not knowing, like you said, that connection
Yes.
of what's there, what's around us. And because I honestly, as a kid, I'm just looking like this is just a neighborhood, until the next journey comes.
Mhm.
But with this history now, man, I have to go back and visit my childhood.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I agree, because I'm like, I'm looking forward to pass by and be like, oh, that's what she's talking about, or that's where especially the part I know because I'm at Harris Stowe often, and so just the understanding what was there before, and even looking over at SLU as well, and just seeing like, wow, that's amazing, 20,000 households, 20,000 people,
20,000
that were
people.
there. Wow, that's amazing.
And one thing I didn't point out in that map on the campus of Harris Stowe, right next to Vashon High School, is where the St. Louis Stars Negro League played their baseball games.
Oh,
Wow.
And I understand that the St. Louis Cardinals funded some kind of restoration, and they're going to rename that section right there on the corner of Market and Compton, St. Louis Stars something. But that's where they actually played. They had a stadium.
Oh, wow.
They had a stadium there.
Right there. We started out by saying that this story is very St. Louis. And those that are in the area can relate, because it's in the heart of the city. So, you cannot, have some connection to that. But even no matter where you're connecting from, anywhere in the country, it's this very similar story, and so one of the things that's this year is the 100th anniversary of the Tulsa Massacre, which was when Black Wall Street was destroyed, when the white side of town came over and destroyed Black Wall Street. And so that's always like lifted up as the epitome, which is fine, but it's not unique. There's so many communities, like if you'd probably go and look at some of the history books, it probably would say blighted area or whatever, if it says anything at all.
Yes.
But you bring out your family history and really show the emotion and the activities and just
the humanity of the people. I mean, in doing my research, all I could find was descriptions of how it was a slum, how it needed to go. And there was this concerted campaign by the newspapers, the politicians, and the businessmen to persuade white voters to vote for a bond issue to tear this down. And there were two bond issues. There was one in 1947 that failed. And because white people were thinking probably, they're there, they're contained, let them be. I'm not gonna spend any money. I'm not gonna spend any money on a bond issue and taxes, just let them be. And it failed. So they had to rethink their whole strategy for persuading white voters to vote in this bond issue. So the next bond issue was 1954. Between 47 and 54, they built Pruitt-Igoe housing project. And so the idea was, okay, we got someplace for them to go. We're going to put them in the projects. And we need this land because it's right next to Union Station. Visitors coming in, we don't want them to see this slum. But the fact is, probably for 50 years before any of this happened, there had been a plan to have this land. It was the heart of the city. This was basically a land grab. They said, okay, we want this back now. And so we allowed, or we corralled these Black people in here, but now we got to move them out. And white people are saying, I don't know where you're going to move them because they're not moving next to me. Right. So there had to be a plan. You couldn't just go, poof, Black people go, whatever.
No,
it wasn't happening. So it was a major campaign. And frankly, what they did was, realtors and businessmen, politicians figured out a new place that was populated by white people and said, okay, we'll draw a line around here. Realtors steer all of these people who can afford to have a down payment here. The rest of them, put them in Pruitt-Igoe. And so the white people that they selected, that area is now called north of Del Mar. The city limit. So those people, those white people were just sacrificed. So they started selling to Black people. And I'm telling you, those white people, talk about white flight. They got out of there quick. And within a year, all of that was Black. And they were beautiful, huge houses. You know, we had lived in 3 rooms. Then now we had a 9-room house. We couldn't even heat. We were used to chopping wood and hauling coal, and now we had to buy oil. So, you know, and that happened to a lot of people. Many of those people had never owned a home and never taken care of a home, certainly didn't have the money to put a roof on it when it was leaking or heated. And so it was a quick transition before that area went down a lot. And the other thing that happened was the small businessmen, white businessmen who were the grocery stores and the cleaners and the drugstore and the bakery, they all left too. So there was disinvestment. So there wasn't anybody, you know, we had to get on a streetcar to go to the supermarket. You couldn't walk to a store. So it was just a cycle of craziness.
Yes.
You know, again, and the same thing happens over and over again all over the country.
That's right.
Yes.
That's right. Yeah. So I think like what Anthony was saying earlier, you know, you could walk out your street and down the street and see, oh, why are things like right now the term of the Del Mar divide, right? And try to understand where did that come from? Like why are things different here and there? And if you don't know this history, you're going to make false conclusions.
Yes.
Right? You're not going to understand fully what's going on. So that's why I think it's just so important in the way that you do it. Is just really brings it across. So like you said, show the humanity of what was done.
Yeah. And that's why I love the narrative of how you wrote the book from your childhood.
Yes.
Because too often we get caught in the mindset of what the perspective is today.
Yes.
And the fact that you took it back to when you were a child, it wasn't a slum to you.
Right.
It wasn't a ghetto, right? It was. This is the childhood. This is home.
Yes.
Yes. So I love that perspective.
At that time, when you were moving around that, you said 10 years old, something like that.
Yeah.
Any sense about what was going on?
No, absolutely not. So you have to remember, there was not all these computers and internet. 500 channels. We had 3 channels on the TV, and we watched. And the evening news was a half hour, and then it was like 20 minutes at 10 o'clock at night. And the TVs that we had, because you know we had 2 TVs, one with a picture and no sound, and one with a sound and no picture. They were stacked on top of each other. Because TVs are fairly new, and when those little those little, what do they call those little things that used to run the TV? They're not batteries, but anyway,
Tubes?
tubes, yeah.
The
So
tubes.
the tubes would burn out and the TV didn't work anymore.
Yeah.
So we didn't hear the news. We didn't know what was going on. And the other thing was adults didn't talk to children. So we didn't know what was going on. Certainly my parents knew. But no, I had no idea. When you're 10 years old and you're sleeping in one room with 7 other people and you're boiling water to wash dishes, to take a bath, we had to boil water to take that one bath on Saturday night. And it was like a whole production of baths and getting ready for church and shining shoes and ironing clothes. So you move into a house and you turn on the faucet and hot water comes out. Oh my God, we went crazy. My father had to like bar us from taking showers. We had never even seen a shower. It was like, my father was like, doesn't take that long to clean yourself. Get up, turn the water off. So
Yes.
all we knew was that suddenly we had more space. I only had to sleep in a room with one other person for the first time in my life. We had a school that looked like a castle. It had a lawn, and we did miss our friends. We missed the closeness because things were more spread out. So we were used to being just jammed together, not only in the family, but in the whole neighborhood. Everybody knew what was going on. You couldn't do anything because all the neighbors knew your mother. Your school teacher lived across the alley. You walked to church, you walked everywhere, or you took the streetcar. So I didn't know anything about what was, all I knew was, why were we living like that when we could have lived like this? That I remember being confused by that. Like, so, because we never left there. So going all the way out to Hamilton Heights, which is basically right off of Hamilton, between Hamilton and Skinker. That was like going to another country for me.
Wow.
There were different kinds of trees. Even the trees were prettier. You know, we had sycamore trees, where in Mill Creek we had walnut trees and these wild trees that just grew up out of everything. So everything was different, and to me it was nicer. And luckily we did see our friends still at church. So, and eventually we found other people who were maybe 2 blocks away or 3 blocks away, because they all generally were steered to the same area. Overnight, Soldan High School went from white, primarily Jewish, to a Black school. I have a picture of my brother on the football team at Soldan High School, and there's one white boy on the football team in 1961, which was 2 years after, you know, we moved there. So within 2 years,
with that being your recollection, like, it sounds like, you know, in some ways it felt like progress to you. You're going to a bigger place. I mean, there's always pluses and minuses, but overall, bigger place, running water, those various things. So what, in your research to put together this book, what was some of the most, I don't say shocking, or just like, wow, like, you know, revealing things that you came across that, like.
Very interesting things. I found letters, actual letters, typed letters, original letters from bankers and businessmen to the women of the League of Women Voters, trying to persuade them to support the bond issue, where the League of Women Voters were not on board initially. They were not on board in 1947. So there was this effort to get all of these people, because the first thing that the League of Women Voters said was, where are they gonna go? I mean, that was in the letter, almost those words, where will these people live?
That was the question.
So those kind of frank conversations in letters from business people was very, very interesting. There was another document I found where Margaret Bush Wilson, who was a very prominent attorney, female attorney. She was president of the NAACP for a while. She was a young attorney, and her father was probably one of the major Black realtors in the country. So they kind of pulled him over to their side because they knew that he was going to be able to make some money with finding real estate, finding houses for some of these people who could afford it. She was on the opposite side. So there was a time when Margaret Bush Wilson and her father were on opposite sides of this whole Mill Creek thing. That was interesting. They were to read those letters and what she was doing in her little committees, and his name was on this whole list, probably only one or two Blacks on this list of 100 businessmen who are supporting Mill Creek. And it was also interesting that some of the Black newspapers were for it before they were against it, because it was promised that houses would be built for people who were relocated, that they were building Pruitt-Igoe, which was supposed to be really, really nice. And frankly, they had hot water. It was new. They had elevators. They had heat. So initially it was a good thing for them until it wasn't, until they stopped maintaining it. And the other interesting thing was Pruitt and Igoe were two separate sets of public housing. Igoe was supposed to be for whites, for whites, and Pruitt was supposed to be for Blacks. Well, the white folks didn't come. So they built this up, and white people said, I'm not across the street, no. So it ended up being all Black. So that didn't happen. So those are lots of things that I learned that was beyond my personal stories that helped me know what the backdrop was. Because I was a child. I didn't even know we were segregated. I didn't even know that there were people who despised me. I had no idea. And my parents kept that from us. They came from the South. They knew that up close and personal, and they kept that from us. And I think consequently, by the time I figured out what was going on in the world, I had a good self-image. I had good self-esteem, and I was able to better deal with it by high school and college. I was in college in 68, and that was the beginning of all the protests. We protest for Black Studies classes. So all of your Black Studies classes, Anthony, you can thank me.
Thank you.
Yeah, say thank you.
Because we demonstrated and we boycotted just to get Black Studies. I never read a book by a Black person until college.
Wow.
I mean, we did little speeches in high school, Langston Hughes and that sort of thing, but to read a book written by a Black person, it was college.
Wow. That's why this is so fascinating, learning all this information. When my mother was a child, she grew up in Pruitt-Igoe. So we often heard some of the stories, not all of them, but it's fascinating when you connect that with where you grew up at, right? Because you have Mill Creek, and then to find out, well, Mill Creek is no longer exists, but then here comes Pruitt-Igoe. And then we know this tragic story of your Pruitt-Igoe, and it's like you said before, the cycle just continues and continues and continues.
Over and over again. With that said, then it's important to know the past to understand the present. But like for younger people, let's say middle school, high school students who the book is also geared for, what would you want them to take away from that? Like what can they take from that going forward from reading your book?
I didn't write this book as a history book, and I don't want kids to be turned off to think that this is all about politics and whatever. I approached this book with stories of a family, a loving family, a Black family that had a father who worked and a mother You know, another myth that none of us had fathers who stayed in the home. My father was there. So I write these stories about us being human beings, about us struggling, about us learning lessons, about us making mistakes, and being just like everybody else, because I never read anything that talked about an individual in Mill Creek. It was always rats and outdoor toilets and coal sheds and garbage and all these things to persuade people that we deserved to be just demolished. And so I wrote these stories that are human stories with a backdrop of what was going on in the world. So it's not a Pollyannish book that says everything was good in my little world. It was good in this little girl's world because my parents and my neighbors and my teachers and our pastors did the best they could to make our segregated community the best it could be for the children who were there.
Yeah.
So that's what I want them to get.
Good. I have a couple questions that came from the audience. Are there any memorials to Mill Creek?
Nope. I'm hoping after these discussions that something does happen. Wells Fargo is right in the middle of everything. Maybe some of your listeners work there. They can put a bug in somebody's ear. Wells Fargo is at Jefferson and Market, which was the heart, not only the heart of Mill Creek's business district, it was the heart of Black people's business district. So Black people who lived in Bill, who lived in Webster, who lived on Spring, they all had to come to the St. Louis Argus there was a ballroom on the top of the floor where all the weddings and conventions and celebrations happened, where people could come on weekends. So it was the heart of the St. Louis Black community. And so there really should be some kind of commemoration. There really should be.
So you guys hear that? If you guys work at Wells Fargo, right? We can
put
push
a bug
for that.
In their ear.
SLU, Harristel.
That's right.
All those areas. That's right. The new soccer stand that's there. Understand, we cannot forget our history. So let's keep this alive. This is here for a reason, right? It's here for a reason. It's beautifully written. It gives us a reflection of the past, but I really think there's something here to spur action for the future. And to see what we can do to really make sure we don't forget this. It's important. It's vital history that we cannot forget.
MLS shouldn't be for Major League Soccer. It should be for Mill Creek Soccer.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Mill Creek Soccer. That's right.
Yes,
right.
I'm going to disturb something here tonight.
Love it. Love it.
Plant the seeds. Someone else is asking, in one of the pictures, they showed a parade. Is that the Annie Malone parade?
I don't think so, because Annie Malone was near, it was in the Ville. So I think Annie Malone went down Eastern Avenue, which is now Martin Luther King, because that's just the major street that's near that. There were always little parades and whatever. It could have been for anything, but it was not the Annie Malone. And it was not the Bell Prophet, which was the other major parade. Bell Prophet went down Olive Street. So this could have been a school parade or whatever. I can't remember.
Gotcha. Someone else who says, when I was in law school, I heard that a study was done or a book written about neighborhoods in St. Louis, comparing neighborhoods, and it found that Mill Creek was the neighborhood with the highest ratings in all the categories.
What were the ratings?
This is from Julie Shapley. I'm sorry, I don't know any details, but have you heard of any such study or book?
No, but I agree. Whatever was the highest and the best, I agree. That's interesting. In my research, I never saw anything like that.
Okay. All right. Well, Julie, if it's still on, please. Yeah. And
if it has to do with the number of schools, the number of hospitals, the number of professionals, that could be very well true, because, you know, we had an entire community. We had Black doctors, but the Black doctors couldn't take patients to the white hospitals. So there was only one white hospital, which was St. Mary's. It was on near Shoto and about 16th Street, where Amarin is today, right across the street from there. They allowed Black patients to come in there, but we couldn't go to Barnes Hospital. As a matter of fact, when my father had an accident, they took him as an emergency to #1 hospital. So the hospitals were #1 for white people and #2 for Black people. And that's what they called them, #1 and #2. They didn't even say hospital. Take him to #1. So they took him there because he was on the south side. But as soon as they stabilized him, they transferred him to People's Hospital, which was in the middle of Mill Creek. And the People's Hospital, actually it was right on the edge because that hospital, the building is still there. It's on Locust and about 22nd Street.
Julie replied and said, I heard about this from Peter Jacobson, a professor at SLU. She said she's going to investigate.
Yeah, do investigate. Tell her to go to my website and send me a note about it.
Yes. All right, let's see. Monica asked, do you still have any Vibs hot sauce that you made and sold several years ago?
So I've had quite a number of lives. I had a very popular hot sauce, a Caribbean style hot sauce. And it's really funny because I cook. I used to have a catering business too. I've done everything. It's like, if I like it, I just do it. And so I put a dish on Facebook today, and it was red beans and rice. So I showed how to cook it and everything, and I showed it. And I had a bottle of my hot sauce next to it. Nobody said anything about the beans and rice. They said, is that Vibs? Is that your hot sauce? Where'd you get it? Where can I find it? I go, oh my God. I haven't made it for over probably 15 years now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's very popular local.
Another income line right there.
So what I do now is I grow the peppers in a community garden every year. And I make a couple of gallons for my family and myself and people who just
Can I put a request in now?
Yeah, that's right. That's what happens. Everybody says, I want hot sauce for Christmas. That's what I do. But this year, because of COVID, I didn't go to my garden because it's about 6 blocks away and they kind of shut it down for a while. So I'm on the last few bottles from 2 years ago now.
Wow.
So no, there's no more Vibs except for really special people like her.
Wow. Wow. That's it. Oh, so hey, we're like over, but I'm having so much.
You disappeared. I can't hear you. Jeffrey, something happened. Okay, there you go.
I have it.
All right, I have it now. I can hear you.
All right, one of the questions was, did any of the people protest the move?
A few people did. And in the book, I talk about the president of the NAACP who wrote a letter protesting. So some people did, but I think people were kind of hoodwinked. They really thought something was going to be better. Now, you should also know that most of those people did not own those homes. So those were slumlords. Those were white people who didn't fix up those houses. They were people who were part of the whole plan to get rid of it. So they were just waiting. So any money that went to homeowners and business owners didn't go to a lot of Black people. My grandmother happened to have been able to buy her house, but I haven't seen a percentage, but I would guess that less than half the people there actually own their home, much less than half the people. So I think I did read that there was a $100 stipend given, moving stipend given for people to move. And if you owned it, they paid you something, but they didn't, I'm sure they didn't pay my grandmother very much, but she got enough to buy have a down payment on another house. So
another house.
So,
especially considering what the area became.
Yeah, but the interesting thing about the next house she bought, there was a big tornado in St. Louis in 1959. She bought a house that the tornado had torn half of the back of the house off. So she had this huge terrace on the back of her house where the tornado had wiped it out.
Whoa,
And she had,
wow.
so she,
Wow.
right off of Cobrillion and Newstead.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it cut right through there. So, I mean, sometimes the stories are so ridiculous, you know, you just have to.
Yeah. It has to be real, right? Nobody would make that up, right?
Oh, Miss Hodges, we got a house for you. A tornado tore half of it off, but you know, I'll give you a good price on it.
Oh my goodness. Ms. Gibson, thank you so much for the time to discuss. I think it's so important and vital for people to take the time out to do that. Thank you so much for this book, and I wish you continued success with it. Everyone that's out there, please come to Eyeseeme Bookstore, get a copy of this book, go to our website. Make sure you have this. Again, required reading for your home, for your classroom. Just, you know, make sure, you know, that you guys definitely get a copy of this. I believe it's probably going to be the first of more to come.
Oh, well, that's what I keep hearing. I really would like to write some fiction because there's a lot of pressure when you write about real people, and especially if they're still alive. So it's tougher than you think. A few of the people in my book, they have name changes for that reason. And I was 27 when this book ended. I had already moved to New York City, and my life as a young woman in New York City may not be something my children want to read about. So I was thinking maybe some fiction based on true stories. But you know, I also get a lot of requests to take this little girl in this book and write children's books.
Yeah, I could exactly. Yeah.
Yes.
I think there are lots of lessons for young
Average day in Mill Creek. Yes.
The story. I mean, this is, you know, stories, but there's so much. There's 20,000 stories that are there.
That's right.
So you can really play with that and really,
absolutely.
You know, collaborate.
But right now, I'm still trying to sell this. COVID has locked everything down. I never had a proper launch of the book. So everything has been virtual. So I've sold this book and it's selling very well. I've been on quite a number of top 10 lists, bestseller lists. So I'm so appreciative of everything that everybody has done, and they're really getting out there buying this book, and I hope they continue to.
Don't be the last one on your block with this book.
That's
Make
right.
Sure you get this. Get it today. Make sure. No, it's real. It's very real. Very real. So thank you again, Ms. Gibson. Thank you, Anthony, and shout out to Member 400, and thank you for joining me in this part. And
awesome discussion. I really enjoyed this, especially
thank you so much.
Learning so much history, a part of my childhood history, and wow, I have to drive back home now, right?
Tell your mother hello. Thank you so much. I'm gonna go now. I can't hear Jeffrey.
Something.
Yes.
All right. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
All right.
Peace.
2000. I'm representing Eyeseeme. Let's do it. Aha. Eyeseeme. 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 Hope bunch of them see themselves in